Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really foundational text, one that's shaped strategic thinking for, well, millennia.
We are indeed. We're diving into The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
A true classic.
Absolutely. Maybe the most famous book on strategy ever. And what's really striking is how its ideas pop up everywhere. Business, law, sports.
Even personal stuff, right? It's amazing how it stays relevant. Sun Tzu wrote it, what, over 2,000 years ago?
For King Huluvu. Yeah, during a pretty intense period of conflict in China. And it became, essential reading almost immediately for military leaders.
Figures like Han Xin or Cao Cao, who actually wrote one of the key commentaries on it, shows how deeply they engaged with it.
Even literary figures saw its importance.
And what I found really interesting digging into the sources is how even sages like Confucius and Chu Ci, people we associate more with peace, sort of wrestled with these ideas.
Right. Confucius kind of claimed ignorance about military stuff, but then he also says something like, if I fight, I conquer, and saw war as a serious state ceremony.
And Chu Ci, he seemed to hold Sun Tzu in high regard, pointing out that even legendary peaceful rulers sometimes had to use force for their people's sake.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it? Even if peace is the goal, you kind of have to understand conflict to protect it. The commentators really dig into that.
So let's imagine you, our listener, have this text open. We're here to help unpack it, cut through all the layers of history and commentary, and pull out the key insights. Consider this your deep dive into Sun Tzu.
Okay, so where do we start? Sun Tzu doesn't jump straight into battle tactics. He starts with the groundwork, the planning before any fighting, laying the foundation for victory.
Yeah, he gives these 7 criteria, basically, for forecasting who's likely to win, pillars, you could call them. And the first one, it's not about armies or weapons, is it? It's more.
Intangible, exactly. It's moral influence, a fundamental harmony between the ruler and the people. Are they on the same page? Do they trust the leadership? If not, you're already starting behind.
So unity, trust, like the culture in a team or a company. Okay, then what?
Then comes the commander. His qualities, wisdom, sincerity, courage, strictness, all that.
Makes sense. Then doctrine, that sounds more military.
It is. Organization, logistics, how the army's set up, followed by method and discipline troop divisions, ranks, supply management.
And then the practical stuff. Classification of the ground, knowing the terrain, relative strength, comparing your forces, and finally, constancy in reward and punishment.
Oh, that last one. Sun Tzu is absolutely adamant about it. Discipline has to be unwavering once orders are clear.
That famous story may be infamous about him executing the king's favorite concubines. It's pretty brutal.
It is, but it illustrates his point dramatically. They weren't taking his drill commands seriously, so he made an example. His message to the king was basically, look, you put me in charge, the mission comes first.
And he's clear about responsibility too, right? If orders are confusing, that's on the general. But if they're clear and ignored,
Then it's on the officers. Hence the immediate harsh consequences. It sets up a clear chain of command based on clarity and accountability.
It sounds harsh but effective. But then he immediately follows up with flexibility, doesn't he? These plans aren't rigid.
Not at all. You have to modify them based on what's actually happening. Our sources mention Wellington before Waterloo.
Oh yeah, the quote about Bonaparte not having shown his hand yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wellington basically said, my plans depend on what he does. Strategy isn't a fixed script, it's a reaction, a dance with the opponent and the situation.
Okay, so planning is crucial but adaptable. But then what about when war actually breaks out? Sun Tzu gets really stark about the cost.
Brutally stark, he just spells it out. An army of 100,000, that costs 1,000 ounces of silver every single day.
Wow. Just for expenses.
Really?
And the knock-on effect, 700,000 families impacted, losing labor, resources.
It's a massive drain. And the longer the war drags on, the worse it gets. Weapons get dull, morale drops, strength gets exhausted.
The state itself suffers, resources depleted. I think some commentators mention people losing, what, like 7/10 of their income?
Yeah, through taxes and contributions. And the government's own revenue, maybe 400/10, just sucked into the military machine. Homes stripped bare. It's a grim picture.
So the big takeaway from all this financial pain is speed.
Absolutely. Get it over with quickly. Sun Tzu says you really have to understand the evils of war, the sheer cost, to know how to wage it profitably. And that means ending it fast.
Minimize the suffering, minimize the cost. And part of that economic calculation is foraging.
Definitely. Using the enemy's resources. He even quantifies it. One cartload of enemy supplies is worth 20 of your own.
20 to 1. That really shows the logistical nightmare of hauling your own stuff.
Right, you avoid all that transport cost and risk. And to get your troops to do this, to fight hard and forge well, motivation.
How does he suggest motivating them?
Well, he says you need to rouse their anger to get them to kill the enemy. But also, they need rewards to see the advantage in winning. Use captured stuff, like chariots, as incentives.
And he even mentions treating captured soldiers well.
Yeah, treat them kindly, keep them, and basically use a conquered enemy to boost your own strength. It's incredibly pragmatic.
It feels quite modern, that focus on efficiency and maximizing your gains, even with prisoners.
It does, and it flows nicely into maybe his most famous idea, the pinnacle of strategy, winning without fighting. That's in Chapter 3.
Ah, yes. Breaking the enemy's resistance without a pitched battle sounds like the ultimate goal.
It is. That's supreme excellence for Sun Tzu. He lays out kind of hierarchy. The very best thing, balk the enemy's plans altogether. Stop their strategy before it even gets going.
Anticipate and counter.
Okay, what's next best?
Prevent the junction of enemy forces.
Yeah.
Keep their allies separated, isolate them.
Makes sense.
Then you consider attacking the enemy army in the field.
And the absolute worst option.
Besieging walled cities. He really warns against it.
Why? Because it's just a huge resource drain.
Exactly. Takes months just to prepare building siege ramps, gathering materials. It costs a fortune in resources and, inevitably, lives. It's slow, costly, and bloody. So the skillful leader avoids that if at all possible. They subdue the enemy, take cities, overthrow kingdoms, ideally without these lengthy destructive campaigns, keeping their own forces intact.
Preserve what you intend to gain. The commentators add that it's about changing the power structure, the government, not necessarily harming the population.
Okay. And he gives those famous rules of thumb based on numbers, right?
Yeah, the ratios, 10 to 1. Surround them. 5 to 1. Attack. 2 to 1. Divide your forces.
That division part, there's some debate on what exactly he meant. Isn't there like a main force and a diversion?
Exactly. Different interpretations. If you're equal in strength, offer battle. Inferior. Evade. Hugely outnumbered. Just avoid the fight altogether. Know where you stand.
But even if you have a great general who knows all this, things can still go wrong because of the ruler.
Yes, Sun brings that up again. An ignorant ruler interfering can totally mess things up. He uses terms like hobbling the army with stupid commands, obstructing with interference in administration, or befuddling the officers by meddling in tactics or appointments.
So the general needs a degree of autonomy.
Critically important. Sun Tzu goes so far as to say, if fighting will lead to victory, the general must fight, even if the ruler says no. And if fighting means certain defeat, the general must not fight, even if ordered to.
Wow, that's a bold statement about command. The general's ultimate loyalty is to victory and the state's safety, not necessarily blind obedience to a bad order.
Precisely. And this ties into his 5 essentials for victory. Knowing when to fight and when not to. Knowing how to handle different force sizes. Having an army with a unified spirit. Being prepared yourself while waiting for the enemy to be unprepared. And crucially, having a capable general who the sovereign doesn't meddle with.
And underpinning all of that planning, all that strategy, is knowledge. That fungus line.
If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Everyone quotes it, but it's absolutely central.
Know yourself, but not the enemy. Maybe win half the time. No, neither. You're toast.
Pretty much. And he adds that great little insight. Attack is the secret of defense. Defense is the planning of an attack.
They're intertwined. Defense isn't just sitting back.
No, it's active preparation for your countermove, your attack.
Okay, so we've got the planning, the costs, the ideal goal, the leadership. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of movement and positioning in the field. Sun Tzu covers a lot here across several chapters.
He does. Chapter 4 starts with making yourself invulnerable first. Secure your own position so you cannot be defeated. Then, you wait patiently for the enemy to make a mistake you can exploit.
So victory is sort of secured before the battle even starts, through your setup.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
Through your dispositions. He talks about being invisible, subtle, secret hiding under the ninth earth so you control the enemy's fate, but then striking decisively, like a thunderbolt from the ninth heaven.
That contrast is powerful. Then Chapter 5 brings in this idea of energy or momentum.
Right. It's about controlling large forces as easily as small ones, using signals, flags, drums coordination. But the really key fighting concept here is the interplay of direct, Qing, and indirect, Qi maneuvers.
Qing and Qi. Say more about those. Direct and indirect. Normal and abnormal.
Kind of. Think of Cheng as the obvious move, the main thrust, what the enemy expects. Qi is the unexpected, the flank attack, the feint, the surprise, the diversion.
Okay.
So Z says these two are like the primary colors or basic musical notes. Just two, but you can combine them in endless variations. And this is crucial. They constantly change into one another. What starts as direct can become indirect, and vice versa. It keeps the enemy guessing.
So you're always shifting, never predictable.
Exactly. Your attack, the onset, should be like a torrent, unstoppable force. But your decision, the timing of the strike, should be like a falcon swoop, precise, patient, hitting at the perfect moment of vulnerability.
And this relates to that other super famous principle.
All warfare is based on deception.
Right.
Yes, he repeats it multiple times. It's fundamental.
Make them think you're far when you're near, weak when you're strong.
Appear disordered when you're perfectly disciplined. Seem afraid when you're courageous. Look weak to lure them in. But this requires incredible control and strength underneath. It's a calculated deception.
Like Wellington concealing his troop movements.
A classic example. Chapter 6 then focuses on weak points and strong points. The logic is simple but profound. Go where the enemy isn't. Attack undefended spots. Defend places they can't attack.
Your secrecy makes you unpredictable.
And you can actually make the enemy fight on your terms. Attack something they feel they have to rescue, like their supply lines or escape routes.
Or just completely puzzle them, like that story of Chuko Liang opening the city gates.
Yes. Sitting calmly outside an empty city, the approaching enemy general was so confused, suspected a massive ambush, and retreated. That's a masterful Qi move, playing on expectations. By concealing your own formation, you stop the enemy from concentrating against your real strength.
Then Chapter 7, tactical maneuvering. He calls this the hardest part.
Because it involves that artifice of deviation. Taking a longer winding route, but somehow arriving first, because you've drawn the enemy off course or found an unexpected shortcut. That Cao Shi example illustrates it well.
But you need a really disciplined army for that kind of complex move.
Absolutely. Try with an undisciplined mob and it's just chaos. Speed is key here, but efficient speed over shorter, decisive maneuvers. Don't march 100 miles just for a small edge. And none of this works without supplies. No provisions, no maneuvering, the army is lost.
And Chapter 8 adds another layer, variation of tactics, knowing when not to follow the rules.
Exactly. Some roads shouldn't be taken, some armies shouldn't be attacked, some cities shouldn't be besieged, some ground shouldn't be fought for. And critically, some orders from the ruler must be disobeyed if they clash with the reality on the ground.
A good general has to adapt, right? See the specific situation and adjust, even if it means ignoring a standard advantage or a direct command. Needs that mental flexibility.
That versatility of mind, as he puts it, to turn the terrain, the circumstances to your advantage.
Chapter 9 gets very practical again. Army on the march. How to camp.
Yeah, tips for different terrains, mountains, rivers, marshes, plains. Generally prefer high, sunny ground. Basic common sense, but essential.
And observing the enemy, reading the signs.
So important. What does the dust cloud mean? Chariots, infantry. Are they gathering wood, setting up camp? Screens hidden in grass could mean an ambush. Birds suddenly taking flight. Even how the enemy soldiers behave.
Like whispering might mean dissent. Or lots of rewards and punishments means they're struggling.
Right. Blustering followed by apparent fear might mean their intelligence is bad. Humble messengers could signal they want a truce. It's all about observation and interpretation.
Reading the subtle clues to understand their state.
He also warns that just ignoring your opponent can lead to disaster. And he stresses that balance again. Treat soldiers humanely first, then enforce discipline strictly. That builds trust.
Okay, then Chapter X dives deeper into terrain itself. Lists 6 types. Accessible, entangling.
Temporizing, narrow passes, precipitous heights, and ground farthest from the enemy. Each requires a different approach. But it also loops back to leadership failures, the 6 calamities.
Ah, yes. The ways a general can mess up. Flight attacking when you shouldn't. Insubordination, soldiers strong, officers weak.
Collapse the reverse, officers strong, soldiers weak. Ruin infighting among senior officers or rash attacks. Disorganization, weak general, unclear orders, and rout attacking a strong enemy with a weak force out of ignorance.
Sounds like a checklist for failure in any organization, really. It puts so much weight on the general's judgment.
It does. Sun Tzu says terrain is an ally, but the real test is the general's ability to assess the enemy, control the factors leading to victory, and calculate all the difficulties, dangers, distances.
And he repeats that point about overriding the ruler's bad orders.
Yes, if fighting ensures victory, fight, even if forbidden. If it ensures defeat, don't fight, even if ordered. Your duty is effective action for the state and its people.
And to get troops to follow you into danger, he says treat them like beloved children.
They'll follow you anywhere. But he warns against just being indulgent. Kindness without authority, without order, makes soldiers useless like spoiled kids. That balance again, care and discipline.
Okay, moving on to Chapter 11. The 9 varieties of ground, or situations. This seems like a more detailed look at strategic positioning.
It is. It classifies ground based on how deep you are in enemy territory or the strategic nature of the position. And each demands a specific response.
Like dispersive ground, your own territory troops might want to scatter, so don't fight big battles there.
Right. Facile ground, just inside enemy lines, don't stop, keep moving. Contentious ground, key terrain for both sides, grab it first if you can, otherwise don't just charge in. Open ground, lots of room, don't try to block the enemy rigidly.
Intersecting highways connects allies' focus on alliances. Serious ground, deep inside enemy territory, plunder for supplies, be ready for commitment. Difficult ground, tough landscape, just keep marching through. Hemmed in ground, tricky retreat, use clever tricks, stratagems.
Like Hannibal using oxen with torches on their horns to create a diversion and escape.
And finally, desperate ground. No escape. You must fight.
Fight, yes. This seems counterintuitive, putting your own troops in a corner.
It does. Why would you do that?
Sun Tzu believes that extreme danger brings out extreme effort. Plunge your army into desperate straits and it will come off in safety. He cites Han Sen's famous battle, fighting with his back to a river.
By taking away the option of retreat, he forced them to fight for their very survival.
Exactly. That survival instinct becomes a powerful weapon. Danger focuses the mind, makes troops resist fiercely, fight hard, obey instantly. The general needs to harness this, keep the army focused, give the enemy no rest.
And he mentions managing the army like one person. Quiet planning, just enforcement,
Yeah.
and even misleading your own troops.
Yes, deliberate mystification. Keeping officers and men in the dark about the real plan with false reports like Pan Chao did to ensure total secrecy and prevent leaks or doubts.
Ultimate control through information management. Which brings us perfectly to the final, absolutely critical piece, intelligence gathering. Chapter 13, the use of spies.
He frames it so powerfully. He reminds us again of the huge cost of war, the suffering, the expense.
And then says that being stingy with money for spies, the very thing that could give you the foreknowledge to end the war quickly, is basically inhuman.
Right. You're choosing to prolong suffering just to save a few bucks on intelligence. It's a false economy. Foreknowledge, he insists, doesn't come from divination or calculation alone.
It comes from people. From spies.
From men who know the enemy's situation. And he breaks them down into 5 types.
Okay, what are they?
You've got local spies, just using people who live in the enemy territory. Inward spies, enemy officials you've managed to turn, maybe through bribery or exploiting discontent.
Okay.
Then converted spies. These are enemy spies that you've captured and persuaded to work for you. Very important. Doomed spies agents, you deliberately feed false information, expecting they'll pass it to the enemy, even if they get caught later.
A calculated sacrifice, almost.
And finally, surviving spies, the classic image. Agents who penetrate the enemy camp and actually come back with reliable news.
And the relationship with spies has to be special.
Absolutely. Utmost intimacy, generous rewards, and total secrecy. Mouth-to-ear communication.
And you said the converted spy is the most important. Why?
Because they're the fountainhead. A reliable converted spy gives you credible information that helps you recruit and manage all the other types effectively. You learn who in the enemy camp might be susceptible, for inward spies. You learn how the enemy thinks, to use doomed spies well. You know where to send surviving spies. He gives examples like Ai Qi helping overthrow the Xia dynasty. These agents were pivotal.
But it's incredibly risky. Leaking information early
means death for the sky and the person who heard it. The stakes are incredibly high. He even specifies the kind of detail spies should get names of the enemy general's close staff, aides, guards, especially if you have a very specific objective like assassination or capturing the command structure.
So intelligence isn't just a bonus, it's woven into the fabric of every single operation.
Absolutely essential. You need that subtlety, using spies for all kinds of business.
Wow. Okay, stepping back from all these details, the planning, the cost, the ideal of bloodless victory, the constant adaptation, deception, leadership, terrain, and finally, this absolute reliance on intelligence.
It really is a complete system for thinking strategically, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about armies. It's about how you approach any kind of Challenge or competition. Efficiency, knowing yourself, knowing the situation, adapting.
These ideas, strategy, information management, resource allocation, leadership under pressure, they just feel timeless. They apply because, well, conflict and challenges are just part of life.
Whether that's in the marketplace, leading a project, dealing with difficult relationships, or even just chasing a personal goal.
So maybe think about the battles you face in your own life. How can these ancient insights from Sun Tzu about truly knowing your enemy or challenge and knowing yourself, your own strengths and limits, understanding the real cost of letting things drag on, the power of timing, maybe even a little calculated deception or unexpected approach, varying your tactics based on the terrain of the situation, and above all, the critical need for good information, how can that help you navigate your challenges more effectively and achieve your own kind of victory today?
Definitely something worth pondering.